Hey everyone, welcome to Bible Discovery's The Weekend Show, where, as you know, on Bible Discovery TV, we're going through the Bible this year, like we do every year, but there are some big topics that we don't get a chance to talk about on the daily show or in the Bible guide, so that's what we do here on The Weekend Show. We also love to bring in your comments and questions as well. They really make for great discussion questions, and we try to answer them as best as we can, or at least give you diving boards for further thought and further research in the scriptures and elsewhere. So Matt, why don't you let everyone know what we were supposed to read this week in the Bible?
The key word there is supposed to read. You're supposed to read
Yes.
it. If you didn't, that's okay. So we were supposed to read Mark 5 to Luke 2. So that's mainly Mark that we're dealing with this week. And that the questions we have that are pertaining to that are about the spirits in the pigs. What happened to those spirits? We're also talking about whether Christ physically rose from the dead or was it just spiritual. And then finally, our big question, which is pretty big in my mind, or some people think it's a really big question, is, does Mark 16, verses 9 to 20, belong in the Bible? So that's our big question.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, Corie, I think we need to get started. And do you want to ask the first question or do you want me to?
Yes, I'm going to ask you the first question, actually.
Okay, let's do that.
This comes from Mark chapter 5, verses 10 to 13. So this is when Jesus is in the area of the Gadarenes.
Yeah.
And he casts demons out of the men who were living in the tombs.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So the question is this. Why did Jesus give the spirits permission to stay in the region? What happened to the spirits after the pigs died? Isn't that giving them what they wanted? And this question is from Chris.
Okay.
So again, you know the story, Mark chapter 5. Jesus goes over to the area of the Gadarenes. He's confronted by these men who are demon-possessed, and he has a conversation with the demons, casts them out into a herd of pigs. The pigs run into the sea and drown.
So let me just read it.
Sure.
Let me just read it. Okay.
That'd be better than me summarizing it.
Right, let's just do that. Okay. So they came, I'm going to start off with just verse 1 and just keep reading down. Okay, so several verses. They came to the other side of the sea and of the country of Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could find him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, by God, do not torment me. For he was saying to him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And Jesus asked him, What is your name? He replied, My name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, Send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man and the one who had been named Legion sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. Okay. So the question is, why did Jesus give the spirits permission to stay in the country or region? That's a really good question, and that has to do, in my mind.
I guess the assumption is that by putting them in the pigs, they were able to stay in the country.
Yes, and the question then is, why not? So Jesus had the power here to have them leave the region, leave the country completely. Like, you get out of this area, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do that. He permitted them to stay. The next question goes, what happened to the spirits after the pigs died? Isn't that giving them what they wanted? So after the question is, isn't this giving them, the spirits, what they wanted? Kind of twofold. Giving them the pigs and allowing them to stay in the country. And in a sense, I would say yes and no. It's not like Jesus is just like, oh yeah, whatever you want, I'll just give it to you. I don't think it really works that way, to be honest. Christ knows more. So Christ knows exactly what's going on. And so when it comes to this specifically, I don't know, apart from there being territorial spirits, perhaps Christ knew that it actually was in people's benefit that they didn't leave the country, he's not just going to listen to them, even though that's what they want, but perhaps it actually worked out that they wanted that. So I would say that them staying in the region is not necessarily like Christ giving the spirits what they want. And another set, what happened to the spirits after the pigs were died? Because I guess the question would then is thinking of, isn't this giving them what they want? Because after they go in the pigs, they drown, the spirits are out of the pigs, they just go ahead and terrorize more people. I don't think that it really gave them what they wanted, because what Christ did was specifically, we are one, we're legion, right? They're all speaking together as one, like an egregore. They're all different entities acting as one entity. And then Christ divides them all to 2,000 and some, and they all fall in the water, jump off the cliff. So Christ divided the legion completely. He didn't just allow them to be together in one pig. He didn't just put them all in one pig, although they were in one man. So he did separate them completely. However that works in the spiritual world, I'm not too sure. But there was a dividing process happening. What were you thinking?
Yeah, and I mean, we got to think about Christ's mission. What was Christ's first mission when he came here to earth the first time? It was about building the kingdom of God first, rather than, like, he defeated Satan, but he wasn't specifically dealing with the demons. So the purpose of casting the demons out of all the people that he cast demons out of wasn't to punish the demons. It was to set the people free. So Christ's mission was to set the man free, not to punish the demons right away. And I think even the demons misunderstood this, because they're coming to him and basically pleading for mercy, right? Because Jesus has the power to punish them, to deal with them. But that's not his mission in his first coming. It was not to punish the demons. It was to set people free. So Jesus focuses in on setting people free. But I think, like many of the things that Jesus did when he was here, this was a revelatory act. It revealed things. Jesus is the truth. And when the truth deals with you, a light is shone on many things. So I really think this is very revelatory. It tells us two things. It reveals to us two very important things. One of them is the nature of demons. Demons destroy. Demons are destructive. The demons were destroying the man here in Mark, and in the other Gospels, where we actually learned that there was two men. But it was destroying them. They were naked. They were living in tombs. They were cutting themselves. They were bound with chains, and they would break the chains. They were destroying themselves.
And what's neat about that too is that the chains are there to help the man from hurting himself.
Yes.
So the strength is used the demons are using the physical strength to defend themselves.
Right.
So they can possess the man even further. So
right.
Continue.
So demons are destructive. This is what it reveals to us, because they're destroying the man, and Jesus sets the man free. They go into pigs. So what do? They destroy the pigs, because demons are destructive. It's very revealing of the nature of demons. But what it also does, by allowing that, Jesus would have known this. He knew the nature of demons. He would have known that they would have destroyed the pigs. So why did he allow them to do it? Well, when you continue reading, we realize that it reveals what is in the heart of the people. The people do what? They ask Jesus to leave, because there's two things going against Jesus. First of all, he's living in a predominantly Gentile area, shown by history, but also by the fact that there's a giant herd of pigs here, right? Because Jewish people did not raise pigs. They were unclean animals. So this was a huge economic loss for the area. But also we know from first century sources that especially in the Gentile world, magician, like the idea of magic or miracle working, it was feared. So this reveals what's in the heart of the people. They would rather deal with demonized people rather than having Jesus Christ among them. So by Jesus doing this, two very important things are revealed to us, the reader, and to his disciples of that time, that the nature of demons and the nature of the hearts of the people in this area, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really important to the narrative. And I think getting down to the nature, because the question is to pertain to the nature of these creatures of these spiritual creatures, right?
Mhm.
Why did Jesus give them permission to stay in the country? And now, obviously, I think it's the heart of the question comes down to, isn't that giving the spirits what they want? I think in both accounts, no. I think by letting them stay in the country, once again, Christ knows whether or not that's going to be beneficial to people or not.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to send them out elsewhere, right, into another region. I just don't think that's. I think he
They
knows.
wanted to destroy the man.
Yes.
They didn't get to destroy the man.
That's exactly right.
But they did what they could to destroy the people and to destroy Christ's witness in the area.
I think this story, like you're saying, reveals a lot about the nature, because even the fact that they want to stay in the country, they're not asking to stay on Earth. They're like, we want to stay in this country, this area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this is a territorial spirits who are there, who basically are setting out to destroy people in this area, and Christ thwarted this whole plan. As to the exact reason why Jesus let them stay, I don't know specifically why in the country. At the same time, once again, I think it works to his favor. I think there's perhaps symbolic reasons. Like he knows people's hearts, Christ. He knows, like you're saying, that people are like, get out here, we don't want you. So Christ perhaps foresaw this. I don't know the full extent, you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit beyond my grasp.
Yeah.
Having said that, pigs going into the sea, pigs naturally represent the people of the world who are evil, typically in the scriptures, and the sea represents death. I think that's also very symbolic, but what Christ is doing there, as opposed to just history. But
I also recently learned about some Jewish teaching on demons and water, which I think is really interesting because it provides a bit of a context for maybe how some of the people would have thought, like the original audience of the Gospels and the original audience of this miracle of God, of Christ, exorcising this man and putting and allowing the demons to possess the pigs. How they might have thought about it. And there were some Jewish traditions that demons could actually die, that they could actually be destroyed. And also, there was Jewish teaching, there was some Jewish traditions that taught that demons were afraid of water and or that they could be entrapped in water. Now, to be fair, there's also another Jewish tradition that talks about demons, like specific demons actually living in water. So they're being water demons. There's a lot of cultural backdrop to this that we no longer have.
Right.
That I think is a really interesting way to think about it. Because the way that we think about the spiritual world is not necessarily how the people of Jesus' time thought about the spiritual world. I'm not saying that we're wrong. I think that now within Christianity, the way we think about the spiritual world has largely, not fully, but largely been shaped by the Bible itself, which is a good thing. And it's a corrective, right? But I think it's really interesting because Jesus would have known those traditions. So I think it's entirely possible that he was saying something to those traditions as well by this. So I know that doesn't fully elucidate it or fully go into it, but I think it's a really interesting backdrop. But I think the main points still stand, that this was revelatory and that it wasn't actually giving the spirits what they wanted in the sense of allowing them to continue their primary mission, which is the destruction of humans as being in the image of God. But you kind of see their vengefulness and their nature in it, where they're like, well, if we can't destroy the image of God, we'll still destroy a creation of God. And in so doing, hopefully get the image of God to kick the Son of God out of their land. Right? So Jesus allows this testing, and the people unfortunately fail.
Yeah. I think that's good. Again, there's a lot of you asking why Jesus allowed certain things. I think I don't think we can come up with an exact answer. I think that, like I said, the symbolism of the pigs going into the sea, drowning in the sea, this idea that you were saying, even I didn't know that the
I didn't either until recently.
Right. That's interesting. That they believe that demons can be destroyed by water. Now, I don't believe that, but
it's interesting that there was a belief there.
It's interesting that the relationship between water and demonic activity. Like it's built into the scriptures with, death being the seed, like we keep talking about all the time, because that's what Christ is doing there. He's sending the swine, the vermin, like the ugly things of this world. He's sending them into the sea to be gone for good. And that's the idea. So I'd say that,
Anything else to add?
Oh, I just read something that's interesting. I don't think I read this verse. Okay. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened, the demons possessed man, and to the pigs. They began to beg Jesus to depart from their region.
Yeah.
It's yeah, right. You drew this parallel earlier. The demons wanted to leave, did not want to leave the region, right?
The people wanted Jesus to leave.
People wanted Jesus to leave the region.
Because
that is very interesting.
Again, his miracles are affecting their their economy.
That's right.
That was a lot of money that just died on the sea. But then also there's the fear of spiritual working and
Yes.
like magic and things like that within the Gentile.
Now, just to talk about this a little bit further, I think there is a belief in Jewish tradition that these spirits, these demons, were not fallen angels. They were actually Nephilim spirits, disembodied Nephilim spirits. And the reason why, it's kind of creepy, but the reason why they wanted to latch onto humans so much is because what are Nephilim? They're beings they're fleshly beings that ought not to be, their abominations of their fathers or their parents were of the spiritual world. One parent is of the spiritual world, and their father or mother, typically the mother, was of the physical world, our world. It's of human. And so they're this hybrid sort. And so when they die, they're just a disembodied spirit floating around. So their goal is, the primary goal as disembodied Nephilim, is to get a human body back. And that's part of the reason why they have enhanced strength, all these things that they embody something, they exhibit some of the qualities of what the Nephilim had, being the heroes of old that you hear about. Either way, whether or not that's true, it's a pretty solid argument people can make.
It's an interesting backdrop.
That's what also they were thinking at this time. Anyways, really interesting food for thought. Yeah, I think that for the most part, nails it. I think we got it. I think we got it.
We definitely discussed it.
Yeah, we definitely discussed it.
So.
I feel bad. I'm always just like, can we get a specific answer? Okay, I just feel bad. Anyways, Corie, let's just move on. All right, before I lose my mind. All right, Mark 15-16.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a viewer question. And here it is. I heard that Jesus did not rise physically from the dead, just spiritually, and this meant that his second coming is also not physical. It's just a symbolic spiritual reign. I don't believe it, but does this Bible actually say that this, and do Christians teach this, that Jesus is just a spiritual being? If so, why? Thanks.
Yeah, no, Christians do not teach that Jesus was just a spiritual being. If you come across someone who says they're a Christian and they teach that, they're not a Christian. They are false. That is a heresy for sure of the highest degree. So Jesus being in the flesh and being resurrected from the flesh is the cornerstone of Christianity. So we see in John chapter 1, the first few verses establish that the Word was God, okay? So John chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Okay, so then you jump down to verse 14. It says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Okay, so that's just a really helpful summary of what the disciples taught about Jesus, what Jesus taught about Jesus, right? He is the Son of God in the flesh, not just a spirit that descended on a physical body, okay? So then, naturally when the apostles saw the resurrected Christ, because they had just seen him crucified, and when you see a dead body, you know that it's dead. You know that it doesn't look like someone just sleeping. I don't know. I think in today's day and age, we're very separated from death, but when you're with someone when they die, a dead body looks like a dead body. It doesn't look like
a movie
the
dead
person
body.
That you know. It doesn't look like a movie dead body.
Yeah.
You know that they are gone. And in the ancient world, crucifixion, the practice of crucifixion, left no doubt no one was going to be surviving that. And Jesus certainly didn't. That's why they stabbed him in the side, to make sure that he was dead. And he was. But naturally then, when the disciples saw Jesus, all of them were freaked out, and some of them were wondering if they had seen a spirit, if it was just the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Jesus Christ, a ghost, if you will. But Jesus puts all of that to rest. In John 20, we're just going to read a couple examples of that. John 20, verses 19 to 20, and we'll see how far we'll read here. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews. So they're in a locked room. Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." So naturally, if you're in a locked room and Jesus is not in there, and then all of a sudden Jesus is in there and he was dead yesterday, you're going to think, okay, maybe this guy, maybe he's a spirit. Right? I feel like that's natural.
That's a fair natural, yeah.
Verse 20, when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you." Okay, so the idea is that Jesus showed them his scars. I'm not a spirit. It really is me. And they believed him. Then you jump down and Thomas wasn't there, right? So Thomas is feeling pretty ripped off that he's the only disciple that didn't get to see Jesus. So in verse 25, Thomas, it goes, "But he said to them, unless I see his hands, the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will not believe." 8 days later, his disciples were again inside and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." So Thomas was actually able to physically touch Jesus, which means that he was not a spirit. If you jump over to Luke chapter 24, this gospel.
This one is the kicker. This one to me is a hook, line, and sinker. Like you can't contend this part. But that's
this one does it for you?
This one, yeah. This one is it's very vivid, especially verse 39.
Yes. Okay, so we'll read 36, starting in verse 36.
Perfect.
This is the disciples. As they were talking about these things, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace to you." But they were startled and frightened and thought they had seen a spirit. And he said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? See my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a spirit does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they still disbelieved for joy and were marveling, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate before them. So he lets them feel him physically, and he eats food.
And then he specifies the nature of the spiritual is different from the nature of the bodily.
Yes.
By saying, do spirits have bones and flesh? So it makes it very clear.
He's trying to help them.
Yes,
he knows that that's what they're feeling and that it's natural. And he's like, okay, I understand that. So here, this has never happened before. You didn't expect this to happen.
Right.
So here, let me help you out.
I'll even add another one because I know that one, to me, that one's like, okay. But this one's good.
One.
This one's good too. John 2, okay? I want to ask him, so the Jews said to him, "What sign do you show of us doing these things?" He said to them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." They're all like, "How can you do that?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? It took Solomon 40 years. And then he says, and you said you're going to raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Bodily resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one. Anyway, so it's layered throughout the scriptures. It's not just like at the very end. It's even way before his crucifixion. These are the
And if you're struggling
topics.
with this concept or know someone who is struggling with this concept, definitely point them to the Gospels, but also then the further teaching of the church on it. For example, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, the Apostle Paul is talking to the Corinthians about bodily resurrection and this idea that we have hope of a physical resurrection from the dead. We're not just spirit. God isn't just going to redeem our spirits, our disembodied souls. He's actually going to resurrect our bodies and remake them. And so 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is all about that. It's all about how Jesus was the pattern, that he was physically, bodily raised from the dead, as a pattern that we too will be physically, bodily raised from the dead. And though we won't be exactly the same as we will have a glorified body, it will still be a physical body. And this makes a lot of sense for the plan of God's, salvation for mankind, because when you think about it, he created us as physical beings in the first place. The physical is not bad. The physical world has become tainted by sin, by separation from God, but is not inherently a bad or an evil thing. God created it created us, our physical bodies, to be good. He created us to be, a spirit and a body. And so that's how he's going to redeem us as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I would encourage you to read 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And also, a lot of people talk about how in 1 John 4, John talks about how there's false teachers going around that are saying that Christ did not physically rise from the dead. We don't know exactly which heresy he's talking about. There were several heresies that were starting. So when I say heresies, it wasn't just a separate religious group that was coming up to challenge Christianity. Apparently, there were Christians that were a part of the church that began to break off and teach weird things. And there was 3 or 4 groups of them doing this. And and they all, in various ways, kind of split Jesus into 2 different beings, a spirit being and a physical being.
Yes.
That's a rough estimation of it. You can definitely look into it for yourself. But John talks about some of these heresies as well, 1 John.
That's right.
Verse
The
4.
big Gnostic heresy that keeps reappearing its ugly face is making the spiritual world completely distinct from the physical world.
Yeah.
As if there's nothing overlap and they're just 2 fundamentally different things that are just different.
Yep.
And that has been plaguing Christianity literally since the beginning. So either way, so to believe that Christ didn't rise bodily is to promote that Gnostic heresy, because what he rose up, that's what he redeemed. He redeemed humanity through his resurrection and ascension. All right, Corie, I got a question for you.
Yes.
All right, so Luke 2, in regards, from articles I have read, Jesus was born in approximately 3 BC. My question is, are there articles you know of that can explain the reasoning of the year?
Yeah.
My wife and I really enjoy your program and are learning from it. We also enjoy the Friday questions, most of which we get correct.
Awesome. Hi, Tim and wife. Thank you for asking this. Yes. So Jesus actually, most scholars say that Jesus was born in 4 BC or earlier. And this is because Herod the Great died in the spring of 4 BC. But we know from Luke that Herod the Great didn't die until Joseph and Mary and Jesus had been living in Egypt for quite some time. So we know that the Magi, from Matthew's gospel, the Magi came to visit Herod the Great and said, where is this king being born? And Herod then, once he realizes that the Magi aren't going to come back to him and identify this Messiah so that he can kill the Messiah, he sends his soldiers to Bethlehem to slaughter the boys of Bethlehem aged 2 years and older based on the timeline that the Magi gave him. So Herod's alive. The star appeared roughly 2 years before he orders the slaughter of the baby boys of Bethlehem. We know that Joseph and Mary flee to Egypt, and they only come back to Judea once Herod the Great dies. Herod the Great died in spring of 4 BC. So Jesus was probably born at least 6 BC, maybe even more towards 8 BC. Now, Luke gives us more historical markers, right? So the census of Quirinius, which is a really, really difficult thing to find historically. There are answers for it, but it's a really difficult challenge to try to figure out the birth of Christ in this. So anywhere between 8 and 4 BC was probably the birth of Christ. So there's 2 articles that I would recommend to you. ABR, Associates for Biblical Research, they have an article on their website. Their website is biblearchaeology.org, and the article is called Quirinius's Census. That's really helpful. Then Biblical Archaeology Review. Their website is Biblical Archaeology. I can't remember if it's a .com. I think it's a .com, biblicalarchaeology.com. It's Biblical Archaeology Review. They had New Testament scholar Ben Witherington III write an article called The Turn of the Christian Era. And in that article, Ben Witherington goes into where the system of BC and AD actually came from. So BC stands for before Christ, and AD stands for Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, right? Because the question then stands, well, how can Jesus be born 8 to 4 years before Christ, right? And that's because it was based off of a miscalculation. And I had to write his name down because I always forget it. The monk, the Christian monk, who is credited with coming up with the system of BC and AD. His name was Dionysius Exiguus. However, I'm probably slaughtering that name. He was from the area of Romania, Bulgaria, and he lived in the 5th and 6th centuries AD. Okay, so he is credited with coming up with a system of BC and AD because he was actually trying to date a Roman consul's regnal years to the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, even though this system was kind of penned by this monk in the 6th century AD, it didn't become popular until the 8th century AD, when it was used in an ecclesiastical history, so a history of the church. Someone was writing a history of the church and they decided to adopt this system, and it really took off from there. So it was based, unfortunately, on a miscalculation of this monk in the 5th century. But we've been using it for so long at this point that there's no real point in changing it. We just get to deal with the oddity of saying that Jesus Christ was born 8 to 4 years before Christ.
Right.
It is what it is.
It's an oddity.
But yeah, I would check out those 2 articles, Quirinius' census from the Associates for Biblical Research, and then Ben Witherington's article called The Turn of the Christian Era in Biblical Archaeology Review.
.org. I just looked it up.
Is it?
It's
.org is the
BAS?
Bible archaeology, but is the
It's biblearchaeology.org, but that's Biblical Archaeology Society.
No,
Is it
that's
the same thing as the review.
No, biblearchaeology.org is ABR.
Maybe we should just post the articles in the comments.
In the comment section, in the description. It's going to be posted so that you guys
There's
can
so
find
many
it.
different options that are all so similar that I'm like, I'm
you can find it.
confused.
You can find it.
Yeah.
We'll find it for you and link it if you're interested in reading those, because there's a ton of interesting information if that's what floats your boat, and it does float my boat.
It's a pretty fun boat to float. All right, Corie, the big
Yes,
question.
The big question, Matt. Like, I've been talking for a while. Do you want to ask me this, or do you want me to ask you this?
You can ask it to me. It's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The big question that we will discuss today: does Mark 16 verses 9 to 20 belong in the Bible?
Okay. So the question inherently is asking whether or not, because it's, all the manuscripts, in the earliest manuscripts, there's no evidence that suggests that Mark 16 verses 9 to 20 are there.
Right.
All evidence suggests that. And you'll often see this in here in the ESV I have. It says some of the earliest manuscripts do not include this portion. Now,
the style is different, the vocabulary is different, and it doesn't appear in the earliest manuscript copies.
That's right.
So most, I think pretty much all, except for one that I know of, New Testament scholar says that this was not original to Mark.
Right. I have not done enough research into this question to give it its due.
Okay.
I want to lean towards that it belongs in there. I just want to lean that way, just naturally, of course, for obvious reasons. At the same time, if let's do it this way. Suppose that it isn't. Suppose that it is later, at a later date, right? Now we don't know for sure. Could it have been? It
probably was. But.
Right. Suppose it wasn't in the original, but then it was, and a later edition came from Mark, who wrote it in there later on in his life. Suppose that happened, and then all of a sudden it gets passed down this route, but it wasn't down in Alexandria, but it was in Galatia. I'm just making things up.
Yep.
The point here is that suppose that happens. Well, after 20 years, maybe your vocab changes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the way you speak, your style changes.
Or you use a scribe.
Or you use a scribe, and someone else writes it in, right? Or whatever it might be. So I'm partial to this idea that we shouldn't rely on the fact just because it's not in the earliest manuscripts, because we don't have the originals. Because we don't have the originals, and we're just relying on the earliest manuscripts, we shouldn't just say hook, line, and sinker, or, the puck stops here, it's over, it doesn't belong in the Bible. I just think that is not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I think it's going too far.
Especially because when you look at the content of Mark 16, 9 to 20, almost all of it is found in the other Gospels. There's not some new account that's being added by Mark 16, 9 to 20.
And go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that is unknown about it. There's nothing heretical about it. There's no inconsistencies about it.
Even the ones I've heard people reject it because you should never reject something because of its abuses, first of all.
Agreed.
But and this happens you'll often hear people reject something because
of verse 18.
Because of its abuses. Right. Because they will pick up serpents with their hands, and if they drink any deadly poison, it will not hurt them. Okay. So everyone's like, oh, remember that cult in the U.S. that's doing this, and they're picking up snakes, drinking poison, and they're hurting people? This shouldn't be in the Bible because it wasn't there in the very earliest manuscripts.
Right, but we see examples of this in Acts, right?
With Paul
and James.
Exactly. So it actually happens in the books. So it's I'm kind
Acts
of
28 and James 5 talk
Yes.
about the sick being healed and
and then Paul,
and poison
literally
and-
Paul gets bitten by a snake, and it doesn't affect him. Everyone's like, oh, this guy's a god, right? So
and he's like, no,
no, I'm not a god.
no.
So to me, it's kind of like, okay, you can't use the abuses to justify this doesn't belong in the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't think you can make a strong enough case to say that it absolutely doesn't belong in the Bible, especially given that the content doesn't hurt doctrine. It's kind of one of those things where you were saying, like, it doesn't affect anything by being there. It is true that if you read Mark 16, it does end on a strange note, right? And they went out and fled to the tomb, for trembling and astonishing, and seized them. And they had nothing, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So, it basically ends on this note that they saw an angel, but not Jesus, and that's it. So everyone's like,
Wait, sorry, what? Where?
On Mark 16, if you read it, the storm rolls away. They come, and they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed.
It's 9 though. Verse 9 is where it starts.
I know.
To
What
20.
I'm saying is, it ends. Chapter 16 ends abruptly compared to the other Gospels. It just ends with them seeing the angel, but not the risen Christ.
But it goes on to 20 though. It goes on to verse 20.
I'm talking about verse 8.
Sorry, I'm confused. That's why I'm asking for clarification. What are you talking about?
If 9 and 20 did not belong.
9 to 20.
9 to 20 did not belong. Hypothetically, okay? If they don't belong completely at all.
I
Verse 8
see.
Ends
It would
abruptly and on a strange note.
Yes, it would.
It
So
just-
you were saying verse 16, verse 8.
Sorry, I meant
Verse
chapter
8.
16,
Yes.
verse.
This is, see,
Sorry.
I was just trying to figure out where
Sorry.
the confusion was.
course,
I
my
figured
confusion.
it out.
Sorry, I read. Yeah, sorry. Anyways, hopefully the
Verse 8.
yeah. the
And they
editor
went
will
out and
correct
fled
me.
from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and
That's
they
what I'm
said
saying. So
nothing
this-
to anyone, for they were afraid.
Right. They
It
just-
ends on a very weird note.
really weird. You see an
Yes.
angel, you don't see Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. So that's very strange.
Yeah.
So is it possible that this was circulating, like this was written down and stuff like that, and then this gets added in later? I certainly think it's possible. Does that mean it didn't happen, or stuff that got added later? Well, no. It just means the person who wrote Mark decided to add more to it, or maybe later on down the road, someone added something to it to give it more. If that did happen, so that's the question then. Should we allow? And here's the bigger part of the question: should it even be seen? If we were to say, we know 100% that this was added later.
Yep.
Even though there's no error in it, would we say it does not belong in the Bible? If we knew 100%.
I think it depends on when it was added. Like, was it added yesterday?
And by whom?
Yeah, was it added yesterday, or was it added really early on? And current scholarship believes that it was added very early on, and it escapes me right now how early, but very early.
Right.
Like pretty much right away, this was added on. I think that's kind of where they land. And the fact that it was circulated widely by the church really early on, I'm good with it. I think we keep it in there, right? It's not like it was added yesterday. It's not some guy going, "Hey, I've been, Jesus appeared to me and said, I'm going to write a new chapter of the Bible."
That chapter of Mark.
We very much can say absolutely not when you look at some of the things that you see in Galatians and things of that nature. Yeah, an eyewitness, and we're dealing with the time period. I think anyway. And I'm going to have to double check myself here, but I think we're still dealing with the time period of the apostles being alive and that first generation of witnesses of Christ. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. See, honestly, it depends on who it is and when it was done.
Yep.
And if it's really early on, right, and it's surrounded by immediate apostles, I don't have a problem. And again, we don't know the full context. So I don't think we can say it doesn't belong, because you can't make an adamant stance to reject it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're making yourself basically God at this point. Like, not quite that, but you're basically saying, like, I know 100% when you don't know. Like, it's a mystery. You really don't know. So if you're saying you 100% know it doesn't belong, you have 100% a problem with authority, right? So it's like, Anyways, that's my take on that. I just don't think that that's smart or wise, especially, like I said, the content doesn't hurt it. So, doesn't hurt doctrine, I mean.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Gotcha. Yeah. The things that you read in Mark 16, 9-20, you can find in the other gospels and or other areas of scripture.
This wouldn't even have been a controversy if we didn't look at the records. Like,
It is good. No, stop though. It is good to look at the records.
No, it's good.
It is very helpful
I know it is.
to look at the records.
No, I know. What I'm saying is this could be a scholarly controversy. This is not but this has become like an everyday person controversy, which to me, I'm just kind of like, this is like, we don't have to like inundate ourselves with this. To me, I don't know. I'm not that particular. Like, if you want to be a heavy scholar,
I think though that it shows that the translating committees who are translating English translations are trying to be fair and accurate and transparent with the people who are reading the scripture. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're saying but your tone says maybe not.
Yeah, well, there's so many things. Like they take out so many things, like fasting, the stoning of but look at Jesus writing in the sand. They take out a lot of things that they say doesn't belong in there, and sometimes they just put it in the footnotes completely, and they don't even keep it in the normal text. And
but that's more procedural. That like you can't just pretend issues don't exist. You can't just pretend the truth isn't the truth.
Yes, but hold on. But we're not dealing with truth and falsehoods here.
But you are
maybes and probabilities,
right? But so, when it comes to the manuscript tradition, when it comes to the manuscripts and what's actually in them, the farther back you go, so there are certain realities.
Yes. Some earlier manuscripts do not include this section. I think that's fine. I think that's great. You can just totally say, I think that's fine.
Fantastic.
I think to say that it doesn't belong. I think, or to make it like a popular question that we all need to talk about. I don't think it's a point to talk about.
Right.
Like, it's not like it's like you're saying, it's not teaching.
There are bigger fish to fry.
There are so many bigger fish to fry. And to make this like a point of contention, like this is the hill I die on. Again, why are we making mountains out of molehills here? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is just not worth it in my mind. It has all the contents that you have in the other gospels. Nothing's heretical. Like, I don't think that this is a big deal. Especially because it's not like we don't have the original manuscripts. We can't be definitively, this was in, this wasn't. And even still, okay, we don't have the originals. We can't say definitively, even though we're pretty clear based on the style and stuff. But then also everyone's comfortable with Paul writing Hebrews, and the style is completely different. Okay, not
everyone. Your hyperbole though is not appropriately applied here because not everyone thinks Paul wrote Hebrews.
Oh, I know. I don't think Paul wrote Hebrews, but
there's a lot of people who don't.
But the point to be made here is that like your style can change over time. How you write things can change over time. So if it's Mark at age 30 versus Mark at age 50, he's going to write a little differently.
Sure.
So. But
it's also worth noting that having an amanuensis, having someone write it down for you was legitimate and practiced a lot. Practiced by Paul, even.
This alone makes you say you can't just disregard it as not in the Bible.
Yeah. We all have personal things. And but I think this is a point that we have to draw out. We can all make mountains out of molehills, and we got to be careful. We got to be careful because there is a hill that we should die on, and that's the salvation of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That hill, that salvation through Christ alone.
Yeah.
And that's the hill that unites us. That's the hill that we die on.
Yeah.
Everything else is just the details. But I would like to know what you think about Mark 16. Where do you guys land on it? Have you thought about it before? Is this the first time that you're hearing about it? Yeah. Do you have any other questions that you would like to see them kind of talk about in the comments?
No. So, don't drink deadly poison. Don't handle serpents. And then this question.
If you can help it. If you can help it. 9 out of 10 Christians recommend not doing that if you can help it.
Yeah, that's true.
Made up statistics right here.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's 10 out of 10. I don't know, you guys. But anyway, until next time, happy reading and happy studying. Thank you so much for watching. We want to keep producing high-quality biblical content, but we can't do it without your support. If you feel called to support us, please click the link in the description under Donate. Your support really means a lot to us.